Hi everyone. I hope everyone's well. So we'll jump right into the lecture content today. Today we'll be learning a little bit about learning, essentially, how our brain learns, understands things, and the brain it likes to learn through association, through partnership of different things. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. We'll talk about what that means. And so psychologists have been studying learning for a while, and there's many different ways that the brain learns. And this presentation will be divided into two different videos. In the first video, we'll be talking about two different methods. One is habituation, and the other one is sensitization. Okay, so that's habituation and sensitization. We'll talk about it in this video, and then hopefully in the next video, we'll talk about two other topics. So let's jump right into it. Now, before we get into the different topics, let's talk about what learning is, right? So, for instance, um, learning isn't just what happens in school, right? It's how our brain changes when we experience the world, right? So think about different processes. For example, memorizing a friend's phone number, developing a new habit, right? These are all considered learning. It's the process through which we acquire new knowledge, behaviors, and skills based on our experiences, the experiences that we acquire in this world, right? That's all part of learning. Now, let's jump into habituation, the first technique through which our brain learns, essentially, how it picks up different things. Let's read the definition. Habituation occurs when we gradually stop responding to a stimulus after repeated exposure. Our brain learns to filter out constant, unchanging stimuli that aren't important. Now, what does this mean? Essentially, what this means is that your brain learns to respond less to a stimulus that's happening repeatedly, right? It's your brain's way of saying this isn't important anymore. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're let's talk about this example. When you first move near a busy street, the traffic noise keeps you awake. After a few weeks, you sleep soundly through it because your brain has habituated to the sound. Now, when you move to a busy street, and let's say in your room, right? And you constantly hear the cars, you constantly hear the honks, you might hear some accidents. The first few weeks, your brain is more prone to hearing those because you're not used to them. But eventually, what happens is your brain gets used to it, and your brain learns that this background noise is not important. It's not something that I need to focus on. It's not my priority. So what it does is it tunes it out. It cuts it out, right? And so after a few weeks, you learn that when your brain understands that it's not important for me anymore, you sort of cut it out, right? Even though the noise is still there, you just don't focus on it anymore, and you're able to do whatever you need to do. Let's say you're studying or you're reading or whatnot, right? You're able to do that more efficiently because your brain is able to cut that background noise out. And so that's what we mean when we say you habituate to the sound, because you're essentially habituating to that noise outside, that background noise, which is not important anymore. And we'll talk about a few more examples in the next slide. So, for instance, let's say you're wearing a watch, right? At first, the weight of the watch is it's it's noticeable, right? It's something that you notice, um, right? Your first 10 or 15 minutes or so, you can feel the weight of the watch on your wrist. It might get annoying, but eventually, what happens is you habituate to that weight. That weight is not it's not noticeable anymore because your brain learns that it's not important. There's other things that I need to prioritize, and so the weight of the watch it sort of just fades away in the background. It's not something that your brain focuses on, right? So you habituate to that weight of the watch, and that's what we mean by habituation. And again, background sounds, right? The hum of an air conditioner or the sound of a refrigerator. After some time, when you're sitting in that area, you hear it. After some time, you habituate to it, so your brain learns to like cut it out, like it's not important. So um, you can focus on the things that are important essentially. And I put this construction sound because construction banner rather, because one of the very common examples is construction, right? There's a lot of construction going on, and you can hear from time to time, you can hear the machines operating, and it gets really, really loud. So, in those moments when you're trying to focus and there's construction sound, your brain eventually what it does, it cuts it out, right? Even though the sound is still there, right? The sound doesn't go away. The sound and the intensity of the sound is still there. It's just your brain learns that it's not a priority, so it learns to cut it out, and that's like a very common example, right? And so you can imagine like such an important technique, and it's so important for the brain to utilize this, because just imagine we're not able to cut out the things that aren't important, right? So you're studying and you hear constantly, you hear a construction noise. There's no way you're gonna be able to study in that area because you're just not able to um, grasp that content that you're studying efficiently because of that background noise. So it's such an important technique that the brain uses, and something that is underappreciated definitely. So that's habituation, okay? And then the next technique we're going to be talking about is sensitization. Okay, it's a little difficult for me to say, to be honest. So, sensitization. Now, habituation was when we cut out the background noise that wasn't important. Sensitization is the opposite of habituation. So, when there's some sort of thing that's happening in the background, and it basically makes your brain more responsive. It makes your brain more alert to what's going on, right? So that's really the definition. Sensitization is the opposite of habituation. After exposure to a strong or threatening stimulus, we become more responsive to similar stimuli, even mild ones, right? And what that means is that um, we have some sort of stimulus in our background, and it, it basically, instead of tuning things out, your brain becomes more responsive after something intense or threatening happens, right? It responds more, and it becomes more alert. Instead of, I remember in habituation, it tunes things out. Instead of tuning things out, it becomes more alert and responsive. And you can imagine why. Let's say you're in a life threatening situation, um, right? For example, you're in some dark alleyway, and you hear some sort of bang, right? You're automatically, it's your brain's normal natural reaction to be alert, and to respond to what's going on. And so you're gonna start listening to noises more carefully. You're gonna start to just react more carefully because you're in a life-threatening situation essentially. So it's like the fight or flight response, and so your brain wants to make sure that you're safe. So it alerts itself and it responds more sensitively, I would say. And one common example is, let's say, after you watch a horror movie late at night, you jump at every small creak in your house. Your nervous system is temporarily sensitized to potential threats, right? In horror movies, what they like to do is they like to add jump scares, things that we're not expecting, um, and it just comes to our surprise, right? We're not really expecting a jump scare, and it just happens. So that's what horror movies like to do. And these type of things that we're not ready for, they alert the brain, right? Automatically, they sort of, it's almost like a button, right? It just turns on the brain. It makes it more reactive, more alert. Um, Another example would be, let's say you almost get hit by a car while crossing the street, right? For the next few days, every car horn or how fast the car moves on the road, it will make you jump. And what that is, that's essentially your brain staying on a high alert to protect you. So it's been sensitized to that. And we'll talk about more examples in the next slide. So another example would be like, so we talked about the near miss accident, right? The car um, almost crashing into you. So what your brain does is it automatically activates, and it stays alert to make sure that no other cars over there, and it reacts more to other cars, right? Another example would be like studying for finals, right? When you're studying for final, you're studying hard for some sort of test. Every single little noise, little distraction, it's more noticeable because you're already studying and your brain stress level is elevated. So it's more like it's more noticeable basically. So your brain is more sensitive to these tiny, tiny noises, right? And it's similar to like a allergic reaction. After experiencing an allergic reaction to a food, you become hyper aware of the ingredients and scrutinize every label carefully. What that means is, let's say you have some sort of allergy, right? One of my friends, he's very, very allergic to nuts. So what happens is he has to make sure that everything that he's eating, they don't contain any sort of nuts in them, right? Because he has a very severe allergy. And so what happens is you in when you're allergic to something, when you're exposed to it, right? Your body has this sudden reaction, this sudden strong um, reaction, right, to the ingredient or whatever it may be. So what happens afterwards is that in order to protect yourself or your body from that reaction, your brain is more aware that the next time I have to make sure that I'm not in this sort of environment. I have to make sure I'm not eating this sort of thing. So your brain is more aware. That's what it means by hyper aware. Your brain is more aware. So that's something that is also very common, and that's how the brain also learns sensitization. It becomes more sensitive to certain things, and it's very common for life-threatening situations because in that exact moment you want to make sure that your brain is active. You want to make sure that your brain is alert so that you can hear every sort of thing, because you can imagine if you're in a life-threatening situation, you know, you can die in any second, right? So your brain becomes sensitive. It wants to hear every single little thing. It wants to hear, let's say you have some footsteps in the background. You want to make sure that your brain can hear that, not tune it out, right? So you can think about all the underlying processes, all the neurobiology that would go into sensitization, and we won't go into that obviously, but so this is a very important tactic that the brain uses. So in this video, it's pretty short. We talked about habituation, which is basically your brain tuning things out, and sensitization, which is your brain reacting more to a specific stimulus. And these are two techniques which your brain uses to learn essentially. And in the next video, we'll talk about two more techniques which are quite common. One is called classical conditioning or respondent conditioning, and this is basically learning through association, right? You're creating some sort of partnership between one thing and another, and we'll talk about what that means. And the other technique is called operant conditioning, and operant conditioning is essentially learning through consequences, through what happens after the behavior is done, right? So you do something. What happens after the behavior sort of determines how you're going to learn, and if that behavior is to occur again. So that's just a little insight into what's coming next. um, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you learn about habituation, you learn about habituation, sensitization, and how it's used in our daily lives.